Welcome to Criminal Gines, a comedic true crime watch-along podcast where we watch Criminal Minds, all 15 seasons, and discuss the true crime that can be linked, however indirectly, to the episode. We're your hosts, Stacey Johnson and Veronica Shea, and this week we're joined by Jazzy Byner in discussing Season 1, Episode 16, The Tribe.
No, I tried it once. Didn't go well.
It's written, Jazzy. She had to read it. She had to read it.
I don't know how to read.
It's hard sometimes. I was also public school educated, so
Yeah.
it's awesome to meet you because I've been listening to the podcast and I occasionally just I just have conversations with you guys with Veronica's.
I love it.
I'll send her a screenshot and I'm like, oh my God, he loved to have rats eat people alive.
That's amazing. What was that movie with the rat and he was best friends? Oh, God.
Ratatouille.
Pixar?
No, Michael Jackson did the song from it. Ben. Yeah.
Ew,
that was
what?
creepy.
I used to love the mouse and the motorcycle. He was so practical. He had a little ping pong helmet.
The Great Mouse Detective. That shit was my jam.
That was good. There was also Willard.
Oh, that was creepy. I feel like, are we focusing on mice and rats because Manson's kind of just one step?
He's small like a mouse.
Small, and he's got the raggedy hair thing going on.
He just looks like he smells. He looks like he fucking smells.
I saw this thing the other day and I almost sent it to Veronica and it was which rat am I today? And I was going to make her pick which rat I was. And it was all these different things. I didn't though, so be proud of me because I knew you wouldn't like it.
Thank you. I think
I'm starting to purposely do things that I know you would like.
That's nice. 15 years in, that's nice.
I know. It has been.
And that's
15
growth.
years.
It's growth. Good job, Stacey. Therapy is paying off.
I'm still going to koala the shit out of you, though.
No.
So. Too bad.
Jazzy, this is someone who, you haven't known me that long, but did I ever come off to you as a touchy person, a huggy person, or a cuddly person?
Cuddly would probably not be in the first 10 adjectives I would use to describe you.
Sure.
Yeah.
This bitch likes to come through the door or find me on a couch and latch on, including the legs, all limbs.
All right.
And koala me. And she said, I know you don't like this, and that's part of why I like doing it.
She hates it so much.
And if that's not some rapist bullshit,
she does hate it.
I don't know what is.
She was role-playing being a frat boy. That was...
she knows my type. She knows my problematic type. Now you see. Now you see the issue.
That's why I had to get really good at being friends with people, because that's how I get a leg up in life. Not my smarts. I'm kidding. I'm actually a very smart person.
No, I love your self-esteem. You are very smart.
Thank you. Oh boy, this is a fun episode.
More fun than Hotch.
Yeah.
I don't know. I bet you get that suit off, and I bet he's fun. You're like, no.
He's one of those guys that planks on you. Just puts it in. What do the Mormons call it?
Hot dogging?
Hot dogging.
Ew,
that's
soaking.
not a thing.
Soaking. Yeah,
Soaking.
Soaking. That's how.
Have you not heard of soaking, Stacey?
No, I'm afraid to ask. What is that?
Basically, it's not a sin to penetrate. So the man will penetrate the woman, and then they'll get a very close friend to bounce up and down on the bed to force movement. And as long as no one moves, it's not sex.
Oh.
And so now we know how. So now we know how Jesus was conceived while still retaining virginity.
Stacey's reaction.
Okay.
It's some kinky shit.
That's a something.
The name kind of always has creeped me out, because the soaking part of it.
It's gross.
And I mean, the whole thing's you might as well go all the way, right? Just move. But I guess.
What if
I'm
you
not
pop
close to
out?
God.
Then what? You're just like
You're done, right? 'Cause you
flopping
can't
on
put it
each
back
other.
in.
Like, yeah. Are Mormons well endowed? Is that what we're learning? That they're like so well endowed? We need to
There's no
rethink
flopping
this.
out.
No, we don't need to do any of that.
We don't need to go deeper into soaking. We don't need to steep in it.
Mama was a rolling stone. Wherever she laid her head, I called her. Oh, that's not it, but you know what I'm saying. I think I went too far on the caffeine side, you guys. I'm sorry.
No,
Careful
I
what
love
you
the
ask for.
unhinged nature of this. It's perfect. It's a perfect tone.
Oh, good.
God.
Speaking of onion,
The episode.
Small
The
rat
episode.
friend.
Okay, so this was episode 16, The Tribe. We open in New Mexico. A group of kids are partying in a newly built but empty house, and they get massacred, and a blonde girl gets kidnapped. There are 5 19-year-old victims. They have minimal defensive wounds. No one was bound, and no one escaped. They were skinned alive, and one was impaled on a wooden spike. These are all war rituals of Native American Plains people. The BAU realizes they're dealing with a pack, which is 3 or more that kill in unison. They find out that the killings were on Apache land that had been seized by developers through eminent domain legislation, and the Apache peoples were fighting it in court. The BAU visits the reservation and they meet John Blackwolf, who is the reservation police, also an Indian activist and an expert on indigenous cultures. They also find out that there is an anti-Indian group led by some racist asshole named Minton, and they put Minton on surveillance. The Minton household and the cop watching them are massacred. No one has asked for ransom for this girl who's gone missing. Her name is Ingrid. What a name. Her single father says he didn't know that she was missing, which is why he didn't report it. But something is definitely off with the dad. He does a press conference asking for the return of his kid, and the kidnappers see it, immediately call the FBI and say they'll return the girl, but they don't want to get charged with anything because the dad has paid them to kidnap her. Big old coincidence that there was then a massacre, right? The kidnappers were like, we don't know anything about it. So Reed interviews Ingrid, and she is weird. She has super blank stares. She keeps repeating her name and her social. They find out she dropped out of school and moved, kind of cut off ties with everyone because she was in a cult. This is very culty behavior or prisoner of war behavior. They find out the dad has reached out to a deprogrammer, and he's now trying to protect Ingrid because in all likelihood, the cult and his daughter had something to do with these massacres. They talk to Ingrid again, and she keeps talking about grandfather and his teachings and how he keeps saying that the Apache are lost and wandering, waiting for their Messiah, and he has come in the form of this white asshole grandfather. They find the leader in an abandoned motel in the middle of the Deadlands, and he says that his followers are out hunting. They realize the reservation is the next target because he is trying to start a race war, and the followers are taken down one by Hotch and Blackwolf. This is a very Hotch-centric episode. We meet his brother. They have a fight. Very dysfunctional. Hotch, again, carries 2 guns. We know this already about him. And he's a bit combative with his little indigenous counterpart, Blackwolf. But all in all's in a day's work. Things end up pretty well, except for those who were brutally killed. Fiend. That's our episode.
End.
The end. I have so many thoughts. I have notes.
I know it's your favorite. I know Hotch specifically is your favorite character, which is nice to see.
You, living embodiment of a mothball. Hotch sucks the air out of every room. He's like an atomic bomb of a personality. Just like...
Oh, he's fun. Loud and bright.
And you want your skin to slough
I'm
off
here. Causes your baby to be born without limbs.
Honestly, he's not really a great parent. He's
very busy catching bad guys, Jazzy. He's very busy.
I'm glad that you brought up one of the things, like that it's like set in this prefab home being built over the Native American burial ground. I was like, okay, trope. Like
I know,
poltergeist style. And with all those people killed in the house, it's going to be haunted. Do you think that the people who buy that prefab home have to have that disclosed to them?
Yes.
Yes. They
Legally,
do. 7 years. For 7 years, they have to disclose that. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. That home's never getting sold.
It's really fucked up the real estate market of that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. You'd be surprised. There's some weird people out there that like stuff like that.
There was so many things about them going to that house to investigate. Like once Black Wolf does come into the story, when he goes and he's like, I can tell you've got the gun because you hobble or whatever his...
He says his like right foot instep print is deeper than his left one. He's like, and you don't appear to have a clubbed right foot. He's so sassy. I love Black Wolf.
It leads into like Black Wolf. I have a lot of questions about the people who wrote this episode. Black Wolf looking at the shoe prints and being like, oh no, there were 8 people here. And there was a 19-year-old girl and she was on her period. Like how was he there for 45 seconds and was like, oh, and she had broccoli for dinner. Like that was wild. It took me out. So there
are people who can do that. Not the period and the broccoli thing. Well, I guess unless you're like bleeding. But I work with trappers and trackers for dogs, and you would be surprised what they can see. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I think there are people who could track humans.
Who could tell that there were 9 people around by the shoe prints.
Yeah. I don't know. So I don't know if like, because the way that they came in was in like single file to try to hide that. So that would be, I don't know, but.
They'd also said earlier in the episode that people were tracking in and out of the crime scene. Like that
they would have already
been, and it was a construction site. So there would be multiple shoe prints there is kind of
it would be hard.
So the fact that he nailed the amount of family members, like I know that the show is fake, but you know,
he is right. He is an Indigenous person with powers that we don't know. And quite frankly, it's racist for you to question it.
Oh, drama. I was going to be like, well, yeah, let's be honest. Yeah, Jazzy's the racist one, not Stacy.
Okay, let's hear this.
No, I was going to say, like, if we think about it, we have evolved as a society in which we don't have to do that anymore. However, there are still some practices in certain cultures that continue to utilize that skill.
Yeah, it would be a definite skill if you could tell somebody that ate broccoli from their shoe prints.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But we don't do that anymore.
Maybe it's just I'm so unaware of my surroundings that I can't even fathom somebody being that aware of their surroundings. Like, I'm like, if I walk into my bedroom wall every day, how does this man know that there were 9 of these cult members?
Right.
I don't know enough to know if all of the facts that they were throwing out there were right about Indigenous culture, but I was very uncomfortable the whole episode. Whenever they'd be like, "Oh yeah, they skin people," and all of these like really like aggressive attributes being like, "This is their culture."
I would bet they are true because with those kinds of things, they will like check it with experts. For sure, they will.
Like the writers?
Yeah, the writers, they check it. But what they were talking about wasn't their culture, it was how they went to war with things, right? Which is not Indigenous culture. And like Black Wolf says at one point, you should know better. We don't do massacres. You do. Right? Like the U.S. government is the one who does massacres, not Indian people.
Well, that's what I was going to say is
people.
I love Black Wolf because he was like, they used him as like the vocal of all of my questions. But I don't know if I still trust the writers because it was like 2006 and they're still calling everybody Indians. And
so I had that question. So I had that question with Yellowstone recently, and I was like, why does the Native Americans call themselves Indians? And they say a lot of them do. They will use that term themselves, and they have taken that term, but it is not okay for white people to call them Indians.
Yeah, BAU, like peoples. Strictly, and the cops strictly were like Indians.
But in 2006, that was absolutely still how we spoke about them.
Let's be honest, it's not okay for white people to do anything, really. We don't deserve it.
I realized I should say vocally I'm in agreement with you. I was doing a head nod and I was like, oh yeah, audio. Yeah, no, it's I feel like if I have a question, I try to just be like, I shouldn't. If I have a question about it, I shouldn't. Like that's
well, so where Stacey and I grew up, I used to go like boating on this lake on the Indian reservation. And I say Indian reservation because that is what they are called. Right. They're set up by white people. It's on the signs. But we grew up with Paiute Indians and Shoshone Indians or Paiute people. And it's so hard for me to break that because of growing up there. And that's how you're educated. But the Paiute and Shoshone tribes, and a lot of our field trips were about early indigenous peoples in the region. And we would go out into the desert and be able to find arrowheads. And we would have reservation representatives walking us through museums and telling us about this kind of stuff. So I feel less weird in the space of, not that I like know anything but like I feel less weird asking the questions than like I do in Black culture, where I'm like, I should probably know this, but I didn't grow up in a city with a lot of Black people. So that one for me it's more, I had to do a lot of learning during Black Lives Matter. More so, but that's why I know like and they do talk about that, the cop was like, are you saying that these people aren't Indians because they wouldn't be so brutal? It's like, no, I'm saying they're not Indians because they would not be so confused, that they were doing war rituals of too many tribes and trying to say it's all Apache. And now the Apache are known as the most brutal in war that the American government ever came up across. And they were not going to let white men come in and tell them what to do. So the skinning alive, the impaling, those are things that the Apache did back in the day. But I mean, think of everything we've done in war. My God, nothing
again
in comparison to what,
I don't know. Again, it's splitting hairs because it's criminal minds. Like, so you say like, look what we've done in war. Like these are also things like with as quickly as the show jumps to the conclusion, it's not like white people have never skinned people alive. It's not like white people have never impaled people and things like that. I get it. They got 45 minutes. They got to get this story moving. There was a lot of discomfort where it was like skinning people, impaling. These must be this must be Apache war stuff.
That's fair, because you could also see the skinned alive and impaled on a stake and go, oh, this must be Christian Inquisition.
I was gonna say early Europeans.
Yes.
Like,
right. I just went to the Torture Museum on Hollywood Boulevard and brutal shit in there. And I think that might be why, like, maybe that's why my mind's sensitive too, where I'm like, it's not like these things aren't like just that culture. But it's also splitting hairs because it's
good that we are sensitive, right? Because I'm sure back then no one would have had this conversation, but now race is such a forefront issue, which it should be and should be discussed and talked about, that it is good that you're like, wait, this is red flag central. Is this real? Is this true? But having worked in the industry, specifically with Drunk History, we would double check everything. They do. They bring in consultants. They send out the script and they're like, is this right? And that's why they have people like Reed and Black Wolf as the mouthpiece. Supposedly.
Well, and that was what I appreciated about the Black Wolf character, was it did a lot. Like I kept on oscillating. That's all part of why I brought it up. Like I kept oscillating on the writing of the episode, going, this is either the most sketchy, like I'm like, or it's the most brilliant because they're representing the ignorant side and then the corrective side as a balance. And I couldn't figure out if it was on purpose or not. Like I'm like, I couldn't figure out if they had like purposely done that. So that was where I ended. But I did start off of the episode just like, oh God.
Yeah.
No.
Which is fair. What I thought was a little too Hollywoodized was the reservation. It looked too nice. It looked like they used just kind of school trailers. And while reservations do have school trailers, if you do spend any time on reservations, which I have been fortunate enough to do, you do see a very stark difference in how they live and the roads and the schools and the houses, and most do not have like sewer systems, right? And so it's like it was a little too nice. Of course, again, 45 minutes, their focus is not on the Indigenous people, but things like Reservation Dogs does a great job of showing life on the reservation.
Reservation Dogs, and then Yellowstone actually does a really good job at it as well.
Yellowstone does, for as problematic as that showrunner is. God, Yellowstone is really one of my favorite shows right now, which is so like boomer Republican of me. But like, I promise guys, liberals, you can like it too, because it shows the issue from every side, the homesteader, the Indigenous tribe, the developers, and the geopolitical ramifications that have been like forced into these areas. Of course, you are very much on the side of the homesteaders. That's how it's set up. But you're only really against the developers. Actually, that's who's really the villain. You're not ever against the tribe. And you do see, like, one of the sons is married to a woman, an Indigenous woman, and they live on the reservation. And you see the difference of how they live a lot. And it's a really good job. Yeah, Stacey, that's a good show to show the stark contrast of white life versus reservation life.
In the same area.
In the exact same area.
It's literally the same area. It's wild.
Down the street. But like, that's how Nevada is.
Yeah.
I feel that way about like Palm Springs and 29 Palms.
Yeah.
Or even the Salton Sea with Slab City.
Ooh, it's a creepy place, smelly place, the Salton Sea. Very smelly. And what's the mountain called? Love Mountain. What's the fucking man-made rainbow?
It's around
bullshit?
The corner from Salvation Mountain and
Salvation Mountain, and then Slab City, which is like the wild fucking west out there. But
and then inside of Slab City, there's another art commune called East Jesus. That's a super Googleable.
Dang.
I'm so fascinated by the whole area, and I love going down to East Jesus. But I feel like
you would be ripe for the picking for a cult.
Oh my God, I am 2 days away from being a second-rate sex cult leader's fuck calendar keeper. Like, I know it.
Yeah. I love going out to the desert where they have, intentional communities. That's what people in cults call them. Intentional communities.
My butt.
You have to have a deprogrammer on speed dial for me. Like, that's like, you are my interventionist life coach.
I might be able to deprogram. I've done research.
Okay.
Ted Patrick was a high school dropout who had no training in it, and he created deprogramming. So,
we scoff and laugh, but I guess if anybody was bullheaded enough to figure it out, it would be.
Yeah. I don't think, because they say that at any point a cult can get you, right? Like, cults have gotten doctors, and it's not just these lost souls. It's like, there's a way to get you.
And they're master manipulators.
Yeah. I just don't know. I would be hard. I'd be a hard get. Because
you'd be a hard get.
Like, I just don't care.
You'd be a big fish. Like, the cult would have your photo in its war room, and it would be like, what are we going to do to get Veronica today? And it would be
I think I'd be more likely to be a leader. Like, I could see myself being like, well, this isn't working out. I'll start a cult. Why don't I'll start a cult. Let's see what happens.
I've got a spreadsheet.
I would join it.
See? I already got one. Jazzy, you said you're good with calendars?
I'm good with calendars. Like, about the Manson family, this is the thing that fascinates me about it is I feel like we've missed out on like 50 years of talking about social manipulation and boundaries and how things happen and why things happen and how America's penal system feeds into the criminality just as much as anything else. But we couldn't because he was turned into this mystical man when he was really just a toxic murder elf. Like, he was just like, he was that dude at the party that like, you're like, who invited him? And your friend's like, oh, he's cool. Just give him a chance. And then
he starts playing Wonderwall on the guitar he brought. And you're like, what?
Done.
Right.
That's who he is at the party.
Sign me up. And then next thing you know, you're stabbing a pregnant woman. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
But he was made
A to B.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it really did only take like a year and a half for that to happen. If we talk about when he was paroled and when the murders occurred.
Yes.
Yeah,
Wait,
'cause-
before we do though, let's real quick.
Oh, Shemar.
Yeah, we have to objectify Shemar. Well, just to get it out of the way, just a little bit of, we're taking back objectification and making it our own.
I don't think women ever really stopped. I think we're just allowed to talk about it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, and I think we're less gross about it. We're less criminal about it. It doesn't really turn into something evil.
Right.
Gimme more.
Okay, so you all got the photo of him leaning in his dark blue sweater thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we rate 1 to 5 helpings of Shemar, understanding he's always a 10, but sometimes he's so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love us a Shemar.
I'm going to say this Shemar is giving me a 4.
Me too.
Oh, twist. Yeah, it's like not quite perfect, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, I'm into it. It wasn't a big Shemar episode, so we didn't get a lot of him, but he was flirty with Garcia. Love to see it. He was out of the suit and tie. He's relaxed. He's out in the field. He's tackling people. It's like, yes, please.
Yeah.
Oh, Jazzy has problems. What?
Oh, go on.
No. I just hadn't given my rating yet, and I was going to follow the format, but I don't have to.
No, do it.
Actually, I guess I do have problems. You were right, Veronica.
There it is.
No, I say 5. I say 5.
Yay! We love to see a 5.
We love to see it.
So I'm going to piggyback off of your 4s, all of the reasons, but I also add the 5 because I wanted more of that Shemar Moore. That's my favorite Derek Morgan. And if we had more Derek Morgan, we'd have less Hotch. Therefore,
I see where the problem is. Yeah, I love it. Love a 5. Ooh, it's a good one. That sweater, he was working that sweater. It was hugging him in all the right places. Yes.
It was a Hotch heavy episode.
Yeah.
Mothball. Okay.
No.
Okay, so let's talk about Manson.
Okay.
Yeah, from the time he was paroled to the time we were stabbing pregnant ladies was not long.
It was not. It was like 2 years.
Yeah.
I think so. This was like 1967 when he ended up at Haight.
That's yes. It's into 69, summer of 69. Yeah. So this episode was obviously Helter Skelter to the wanting to start a race war and for the white leader to become the leader of Manson wanted to lead Black America. This guy wanted to lead Native Americans, which is of course just so much racism, thinking that anyone needs to be led by a white guy. But that's what we see with all these cults. It's a way to control women, and they're usually very much steeped in racism. But yeah, I know, Jazz, that you love cult lore and the Manson family. So you tell us, you talk to us about it. Tell us all your thoughts and feelings. On your short king.
He is a short king, isn't he? Like, he had to smell so bad. You were talking about it earlier that he looks like he smells.
All the photos, just, you can smell them. You can smell them.
Think about fucking in a barn, because that's like basically they lived in stables on Spawn Ranch. Like, they were having these orgies, and he doesn't look like a shower, and he's like coming at you and is like, I'm God, man. Like, could you imagine being like, you know what? I think this dude's got some shit. Like, he's really going places.
But like, you would smell too. Like, I'm sure they all smelled like onions. Like, I'm sure that place was fucking like onions and fish, just rank.
So like, the thing about the Manson story that I find fascinating is how much power he amassed just by using the tactics he learned to survive while he was in jail as a child.
Yes.
And part of you saying they smelled like onions. He's encountering people. Like, one, it didn't get to the size of 40 because those 40 people smelled like onions when they got to him. And then also, he is hanging out with Terry Melcher and he's hanging out with Dennis Wilson. They don't smell like onions, I'm assuming. One of them didn't smell like onions. I mean, Terry Melcher was with Angelica Houston. She doesn't seem like an onion fucker, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe. For those that don't know, Dennis Wilson is that of the Beach Boys. And he knew Manson from, I forget how they met, but...
Through the girls.
The two girls were hitchhiking. and he picked him up and fucked him. And then they moved into his house for like a summer and he couldn't get them out. And he was like supplying, at first it was fun for him. Like he was like, oh, look at my new onion smelly friends. And then they like, he would pay for like all of the like gonorrhea and chlamydia medication that they needed all the time. And then after a while, he's like, this is a lot. I don't want to deal with it. And he just moved and left them there.
Yeah. And Melcher had to come in and get them evicted. Like, but then Wilson kept hanging out with, but he was the one who killed himself too, right? He drove his car off. Was done. Yeah.
No,
So he had some problems himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I find fascinating about it is that that social idea of like, you're socialized to be nice. I mean, Stacey, we are. Veronica, exception to the rule.
Veronica was brought up by a strong, independent Jewish mother.
Terrifying.
Yes. Veronica
so intimidating, but I love her.
Jazzy was telling me that when she first met me, she was scared of
That
me.
tracks.
And then in a strong twist and explanation of our friendship, she dropped Andre Chikatilo, the vampire of Dusseldorf. And I was like, oh my God, she's not scary at all.
Yeah.
It's like, she knows serial killers. That's not terrifying. So this is a situation though, where I was like, oh, she's so cool. And then I found out about you and we socially met each other, right? No, I'm bringing it back to Manson. So it's like, can you imagine going to a friend's party or a friend's event and then Manson's in the corner hanging out with Dennis Wilson and Terry Melcher? And there had to have been a lot of people, and not had to, there was a lot of people who I think were like, ew, he's skeevy, but they say he's okay, so he's okay. And I think that there's a huge lesson to learn about following your instincts on somebody based on the amount of people who came out afterwards saying, I always was uncomfortable, and the way that we allow charisma to be king. And the things that we excuse from people because they're charismatic and because for some reason somebody else likes them. So then they get to perform at the, comedy clubs down in Orange County because it doesn't matter that they've started their own cult of personality, Crystalia. So
yes, for anyone who is interested in this, Crystalia has started a sex cult of mostly underage girls. They are branded with his initials.
Very Nxivm light.
Yeah, very Nxivm light, correct. There's a documentary about it on YouTube you can find by a fellow comic who is speaking.
Kyle Anderson?
I think that's right. And honestly, to potentially the detriment of his future career because Chris is a big comic. But he's also been blackballed now from the Comedy Store and the Hollywood Improv in LA.
But
so he's not allowed to perform there, but not corporate improv around the country.
And the reason to even bring it up is bringing back to the what we could have learned. What we could have learned had we talked about this in a non-sensational way back then, because we did get Nxivm afterwards. Like this is Crystalia is a cult of personality where you look at him, you go, of course he's a sex cult leader. Look at him. Like I am not surprised.
Plus he's
Jared
tall.
Leto though. Plus he's tall. Jared Leto, doesn't he do something similar? Cult of personality.
Yeah, he's culty personality.
Yeah,
there's
so
a lot of grooming.
A lot of grooming and a lot of social grooming of peers as well that then allows for the other more serious shit to go down. And as somebody who is 2 days away from being the fuck calendar keeper, that is where I get fascinated by, because it's like, how do I see this in person when things like this are so regularized? Is that a word? Normalized, I think is the word.
I like regularized.
Yeah, regularized. I don't think it exists. But
but you're absolutely right, Jazz, because we do talk about Manson in almost a vacuum of like, look at this thing that happened. And it's so unique that it happened, when in reality, the 60s and 70s were so full of cults because it was a counterculture. People were leaving the church, but they still had that spiritualization. They wanted to find a different way of living.
They wanted to find community.
Yeah, and it was it was rife for communal living or intentional communities. And so there were so many cults before Manson. There were so many cults after Manson that continue today, and not all of them are, I forget what the deprogrammer calls them. They're like harmful cults, something like that. There are some that are not.
Different levels. There's different levels of cult. Yeah.
there are some
I
that are
agree.
just communes, but then there are killer cults, and Manson was not the only killer cult. There were so many, and Manson wasn't even the worst cult. The Children of God, I think, is probably the worst cult.
Yeah.
Or Family International, I think is its traditional name. And this is the cult that you see Rose McGowan was brought up in, the Phoenix children, Joaquin and his siblings. It was just a front for child rape. That's all it was. And that's where kind of deprogramming started.
This is where the women, where we say there are some of that percentage of women, this is where we can call out the bad women cult leaders and participants as well, because there were also the women participating in the child rape. There was nobody protecting those kids whatsoever.
Correct.
No.
And I mean, they've used women as a way to recruit for decades because women are not scary to other women or to children and to families.
Well,
Nxivm used women.
Nxivm.
Yes.
Yep.
And for those that don't know Nxivm, there's a great documentary on it on HBO, but it's kind of the most recent one that was taken down. And he used Scientology. The deprogrammers, the cult experts, do call Scientology a cult. So I'm going to say it on this episode because I said it on a previous episode. And Manson studied religion, specifically Scientology, to learn ways of manipulation and control. And then, of course, Jazzy, as you were saying, he would also talk to all the pimps on how they controlled their women in prison. And
because he intentionally, that was his plan.
Correct.
And the Dale Carnegie book, the How to Win Friends.
Really?
Wait, was it How to Make
Friends and Influence People?
It was Scientology, and that was like two of his jams. And so, then learning from the pimps about manipulation. And that's why, like, talking about it in a social sense, I'm like, socially speaking, I know like 10 people who are close to joining a cult alongside me. And I know 5 people who might be the leaders of that, Veronica. You know, like it
does sound like I have a cult of 10 already. What's happening? Let's go.
It's a slippery slope if we're not allowed to talk about following your insides of, no, he's just creepy. I'm not gonna.
Right. It's really interesting. Like, where does the balance come off, or like where's that crossing line of like a natural part of our like want as a human being is to find connection and community of like-minded people
and
right?
purpose.
So where is that balance, and where is that line of like cult community definition, and when does it start becoming culty, and when is it more so just community? And
well, and the deprogrammer, what was his name that I sent you guys? I forget, I didn't write it down.
Oh my god, he talks.
The deprogrammer,
he talks, but he's very
knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable.
What was his name?
Rick Allen Ross.
Rick Ross, that's right. Of course, yes, it's Rick Ross, which is so funny because of the rapper. But he talks about, because you can really also weaponize people's spirituality as a cult, which I don't think is fair, because churches, those kind of community groups, you know, you could be like, well, the Catholic Church is a cult. The difference is you can leave. You can have a reason to leave, right? And that's what he says. And same with political groups, like one of the interviews with this guy brought up QAnon. Is that a cult? And he's like, well, you can leave it, right? Like, it's starting to become more of a destructive cult because of the January 6th riots. But ultimately, it is a conspiracy theory that you can leave. And destructive cults, you can't leave, because at some point they're going to kidnap you, murder you. Like, there's always this threat of violence. With Scientology, if you leave, they cut you off from all of your friends and family. There's also places where if you're high enough in Scientology, you don't get to leave. You get to be incarcerated at one of their sites out in fucking Hemet. Like, bleh. First of all, gross. The fact that they even own property in Hemet is a red flag, okay? But, you know, so it's that kind of thing. Are they cutting you off from your friends and family, from people who are not in this community? Can you leave? Do you have control of your money? Is what they're doing with their money transparent? Now, the Catholic Church, no. But you can leave it. So, you know, it is a scale, like you were saying, Jazzy.
Isolation is a huge way to start all of the other programming, I think. So I think that's why becoming de-isolated is such a huge part of a deprogramming situation.
Yes.
So instrumental is the first thing. So it's like if somebody's trying to separate you from the Veronicas who have the eyebrow, like I think that that's like a first sign is if your friends are your community, your original community is no longer able to have access to you for whatever reason. I think that is a huge difference. And food and sleep control.
Yes.
Raniere would wake them up at 2 a.m. to play volleyball all the time.
Yeah. You're not sleeping well. You're malnutritioned usually, or it is, like you said, controlled. Nxivm did calorie control. Manson did what types of food they could eat. The girls had to be very skinny.
They only were allowed to eat out of like trash cans for most of the time.
You're too tired to fight back. But they also do it, sorry, Stace, with vocabulary. They rebrand certain words that then make you further off. So in this episode, she kept talking about grandfather and the Apache, can't talk. And she was this white blonde girl, and Black Wolf was like, you're not Apache. And she was like, no, you're not Apache because you've forgotten this, that. So it takes on a completely other meaning that only insiders know. So it becomes very easy to then, oh, well, they just don't get it because they're not in the
for
know.
You to become isolated. Yeah, and make it seem like it's more of a situational isolation and not an intentional isolation, because then at that point you're doing it to yourself, or in the episode she's doing it to herself. We'll use her as an example. She's like saying, I'm Apache, and she's this like blonde hair, blue-eyed girl, and everybody in the room is like, the fuck you are. And then she's like, I guess that's how the cookie crumbles, not realizing that she's so steeped into this thought culture that she's actually isolating herself using that thought culture.
Yeah. And they call like the outsiders in the episode trespassers. I forget what Scientology calls them, but
suppressives.
SPs. Yes, suppressive
SPs.
Persons. That's right.
And then what is a Mormon? What does Latter-day Saints call it? Because also there's people who
the FLDS.
The FLDS, they call it something too. Like it's along the line of suppressives if somebody starts to question and leaves the church.
Oh, yes, when they've been excommunicated or they're they're the outsider. Oh God, it's gonna bother me.
But they've got a word. We'll say they've got a word, and that's that is something that is a church, and the Latter-day Saint wise, like obviously not everything is like the fundamentals and following Brigham Young and shit, but it is. They have those practices. They have the excommunication practice. They have the isolation practice. If you fuck up and you tell your bishop, then you're not allowed to testify for like a month. Yeah. So then everybody in the church knows you fucked up, even if they don't know the details, because you're not allowed to do something.
Yeah.
And all of that little social deprogramming, I think, makes also people ripe for somebody to come in and cult them up.
Absolutely. And it's harder to leave because even though these are religions, they do have some of these practices, which is why Manson studied them. And it starts with, this is your whole community. It's not just your like religious or spiritual beliefs. It's the people you know and work with. It's all of your friends. Like everything that you have to give up to leave seems like too much. And it becomes so much more normal. And like they say with Scientology, it doesn't start with, you know, the lizard spawn, whatever, like Xanadu bullshit that they believe. Like it's so crazy what they believe. It starts with self-help. And to an extent, Scientology does help people. And then it's too late to get out. And it's as you view their way of thinking, you view their way of living, you become more engrossed. It's what you're volunteering with. It's all of your friends. It's slowly giving you more and more information about what Scientology is. That's another big red flag of cults is you don't actually know what's going on, right? They tell you you're not ready to know that yet. Oh, Charlie will tell you in time. Oh, you'll realize this when you're ready. No. Whereas like a church can say, well, this is what we believe. And if you do this, then that's bad. But if you do this, that's good, right? Like we'll use the religious thing, even though I'm also anti-church. They're a little bit more upfront, less so again with LDS because they do steep a lot in mysticism and divide sexes. And I will say that is my church of least experience. So I will say this is what I have read and heard. And I'm sure there are levels of Reform to Orthodox, just like the Jewish community. So we'll give that disclaimer for the Mormons. But it's basically you start doing good things, things are great, and then they give you a little bit of crazy as you go. And it becomes easy to digest. And like this is also how like huge political movements start, like the Holocaust. Hitler didn't start with kill all the Jews. People would have been like, I mean, so much anti-Semitism at the time, they still would have been like, seems crazy, maybe not. You know, it started with Germany first. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Then it became, let's put these people over here. Yeah, okay, that's fine. And it slowly turns into something crazy.
Jonestown did that. Jim Jones was responsible for desegregating a neighborhood alongside his church. And it really was a church. And for the people who signed up, that was amazing for them to be a part of. And I think that that's what somebody hangs on to. And it, like we were talking about, Manson's really just like a toxic boyfriend that got a little too much control. And it like I don't think Manson had anything planned out. That's the part of Helter Skelter. This was him throwing shit at the wall. He used racism as a tool. They were already prepped because they were white people who grew up in America. He used sexual manipulation. He used drugs. He used all of the cult stuff that he learned from the pimps, all of that. And I feel like in the way of when we talk about churches, like there is that idea where we're growing up, it's so accepted that if somebody is in church, they're a good person. You know, it's they're doing good. And I think that in toxic relationships, there's that point where it's like, but it was good once, so it could be good again.
Yes. Yes.
And people hang in because they think it could be good again. There could be that day I'm doing acid at Dennis Wilson's house again. Yeah. Just after we get over this little race war hump. You know, like it's
well, and like the girls talked about, you know, the family before the crimes, that it was a different vibe and how different it was. But he also, going back to that, he didn't have a plan. Helter Skelter, was not a plan. First of all, he was so obsessed with the Beatles, but Helter Skelter was a song about like an amusement park. Like what? Okay, not a race war, first of all, but sure, let's go there. But he had what really the murders kind of turned out to be. Well, first of all, he was fucking pissed that he wasn't going to get a record deal. So he went to Melcher's old house because he couldn't find Melcher and was like, let's fuck shit up. But there was a murder before that Bobby Beausoleil, you know, was told by Manson to do.
That was Gary Hinman, right?
Gary Hinman, that's right. And they tortured him for a few days and stole money from him. And it was basically like a kind of a drug-related situation. And they said like political piggy or something is what they wrote on the wall. And he was arrested for it. And Manson was afraid he was going to turn on him in jail. So he was like, let's do some more murders that look the same way. And then the police will think they have the wrong guy and they'll let him go. So they went to the Tate house and then they went to La Bianca's and did the same things. And so, I mean, he's stupid. He's like fucking assholes.
And we talk about it. This is a pattern too. This is his brain at work because before Hinman, there was a drug situation gone wrong that Tex was responsible for, where Manson thought he killed a Black Panther. So political piggies, he wanted that written on the wall because that was his way of trying to link the Lotsa Papa and the Hinman murder as a Black Panther murder.
Yeah.
And more like if you have brother and sisters, like you going like, I'm going to put their toy next to this so it looks like they fucked up this.
Yeah. It is. It's like toddler brain waves was his whole thing.
And then so that's exactly what he was doing with the La Biancas was he's like, okay, well, we wrote Helter Skelter on the wall, so let's also try to connect this so we can try to blame all of this one crime that I did. I fucked up. So let's try to tie all of this to the Black Panthers. Yeah. Which he was saying is about starting a war, but was really just about covering his tracks because he didn't want to go back to prison.
Yeah. He was just trying to style it out, basically.
Using racism as a tool that all of those white kids were primed to accept because it's so accepted in our society.
Yes. And again, it was a time of severe political upheaval, social unrest, integration. like it was very much what BLM was for our generation, but on a larger scale. It is wild what was happening at this time that set the scene for people like Manson to weaponize racism as well as their misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Because white people were so scared.
If you are primed to accept that weaponization, then it's going to make sense. And so it's like its own greater cult if you don't question why you do things, why you feel ways.
Yeah. And it wasn't just runaways either that he was getting full families. I think we should also talk about, so like a lot of the movies show the Manson girls and the followers as like 8 people because those were the ones who committed all these murders. But it was like 30 core people and like 100 that kind of rotated around them at its height. Yeah. And one of them was this family who had a 14-year-old girl. They were in like another commune, and that commune was all about free sex and love. But there was this 14-year-old and they were like, oh, we don't want minors because legal ramifications. And so her parents were like, out you go. The counterculture was not cute, really. And that's where she met Manson, and her parents basically gave her to Manson.
Was that Snake? She was like 16 when they busted them. And that's another footnote about the story that's wrought with such brutal murder and abuse of people in general. He was abusive to everybody around him. They actually got caught because of property crimes, because money and property is key in our society. Like, there's just nothing more American than this full story.
Yes.
Every layer of it.
Yeah. And his followers weren't 20-year-olds that you see in the movie. They were teenagers. He was a straight rapist. Like, there's no two ways about it.
He was 32?
Especially, yeah. And he even like raped the men. I would say once you're under control of a cult leader, you no longer have consent. So everyone was being raped and also raping. It's just crazy. And it's what's so interesting about Manson is actually what is really never discussed, which it is that control, these exigent circumstances that allowed the prosecution to argue the case that he weaponized his followers. He used his followers as a weapon because they were under his control to argue conspiracy to commit murder, because there was no way to actually link Manson to the murders. He technically, as far as we know, has not murdered anybody, but they were so under his control that they would not have murdered people had he not pointed them and fired them. So they were able to give him life without possibility for conspiracy of murder, which had not been, I think, done before. I think that this was the conspiracy murder case that put that on the books.
Technically, he was convicted of first-degree murder, and then also convicted of conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of the 7 people. And that was including Sharon Tate.
Yeah, he is an asshole.
Controversial.
He's an asshole.
What a way to wrap it up. He's an asshole.
I think we should note, I know that you probably generally keep it evergreen, but I think that we should note that Leslie Van Houten was released this week.
Thank you.
When we're focusing on the way that he used women as the way that he was weaponizing the tools around him, which were people and were the other people that have been abused, it isn't focused enough that the women he took advantage of were teenage girls and were being raped, and were victimizers. So I don't let them off the hook. They committed murders and they also deserve to be incarcerated for their crimes. Somebody asked me this week, do you think she's going to do it again? And I'm like, there are so many circumstances surrounding the way she did it the first time. And she's been in jail for 50 years thinking about all the ways that she fucked up. I don't think what happened to her was as one-off as it's been sold, Helter Skelter wise. I think what happened to her was a very specific set of circumstances and could happen to anybody should we be subjected to those set of circumstances. So I don't think Leslie Van Houten's going to do it again, because I don't think Leslie Van Houten would have done it the first time had she not gotten herself involved in this set of circumstances.
I don't think any of them would have. But who the fuck asked you that? What? Because
it's my grandmother.
Okay. I was like,
she was like, they released one of the Manson Girls. Do you think? And I was like, no, I don't think that's a thing. I think that's if we could say that's the temperature of her generation, because they did also live through it. So she lived through the news cycle of these being boogeymen, right? So in her mind, this is a boogeyman that just got released again, and that's where she's coming from asking it.
It's so funny. So the girls are Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Leslie Van Houten. And Susan found God. She became a very devout, born-again Christian, changing Jesus for Manson, Manson for Jesus. Sounds like a religion of itself, Manson for Jesus.
Well, and didn't she, before she was in the family, wasn't she like linked to Anton LaVey? Like, I think she like danced in burlesque troupe or something like that.
Yeah.
She was culty.
She was always looking for somebody.
Because, I mean, she had a terrible childhood, so it makes sense. But she died in prison. Patricia is still there. She was the last one to denounce Manson. It took her a long time. Tex is still there, also got the death. All these people got the death penalty. And then, Leslie was just released in July. And the death penalty was commuted for everyone in the state of California in 1972. So then it became life without the possibility, or it just became life in prison, not without, they'd have to get resentenced. And they were always up for parole and they never got it. Tex is also born again, but they're never given parole. And when Bobby Beausoleil has actually been approved for parole, but Gavin Newsom in 2019 blocked it. And it's shocking he didn't block. I'm glad he didn't. I don't know that.
I read that he's not happy about it. I read a quote from him saying like he got overruled somehow. I don't know the legal system enough to know how that, but I read a quote for him where I don't know if it's political, but there was like a quote from him saying like, I am disheartened that the board has decided to move forward with allowing.
They did. I'm glad they did, because I don't think she, again, would not have done it. She was the first to denounce Manson. So she was the first one deprogrammed. And, she left her loving parents. Like, she had a good childhood. She just wanted to go live the hippie lifestyle, and it was weaponized against her. And it's just, again, she was a child. And now she's a 60-year-old, 70-year-old woman. Like, she's going to slink off, maybe get a book deal, but probably just want to live in solitude because, like Squeaky Fromme, did you guys know she's a real estate agent in New York?
Wild.
Isn't that crazy? But she, is a recluse otherwise. But,
wild.
There's so much around them to this day. Isn't that the funniest thing? To this day. And she was, one of the last ones to denounce.
She tried to assassinate Gerald Ford.
Kind of.
I guess that wasn't her intention. That's what she got sensationalized
she was trying to get his attention. Nixon. She was going to assassinate Nixon. And then she was like, okay, well, Nixon resigned. I'm going to assassinate Ford. And the gun didn't go off. And there was no bullets in the chamber. It was like, what? So and she got a lot of time.
In this research, I recently came across an interview with her where she said, well, I wasn't trying to kill him. I was trying to get his attention. And I was like, oddly, that makes the most sense. This whole time I've been like, well, there was no bullets in it. She must have been on drugs. No, in her mind, she was like, Mr. Ford. I know he's not listening. I'll use my gun to get hurt.
Oh my God. She's wild. And for people, that's 2 years. I think that was 2 years after Charlie was incarcerated. So these people followed him for a long time. And I think Snake, the girl, still has not denounced Manson.
I think she has. She's one of the ones who've actually said he raped me. I feel like in reading stuff.
Yeah, because she lives it.
They double checking.
They try to not be in the limelight a lot, which understandably so. Patricia would be the one that I'm like, maybe we don't let her out.
Yeah, Patty Krenwinkel seemed to enjoy it a lot.
And she was a big recruiter, and I know that she was under his spell, but
well, so that's the next interesting part about this, because if we're focusing on the women and deprogramming, and I know you guys talk about reform in general, is they did it and they're guilty.
Yes.
And people lost their lives. The ripples felt throughout this is here 50 years later.
Yeah.
Deserve to be sentenced.
Yes.
Also, where does victim and perpetrator, like, where does that line stop blending? Because Manson was a victim. We want to put him in full perpetrator box, but also if we look into his childhood, also a victim. And
Yes.
that's another.
For people who
I
don't
think-
know, he was sent off to like a very strict boys' school for troubled boys and was just systematically sexually abused by the faculty and students there.
And before then was a very abandoned youth. Like his mother was abusive and like all of those things. And I think that's also important to talk about because it paints a full story of how this can happen if we don't take care of each other, if we don't live, if we don't live and surround ourselves with people who want the best for us and raise their eyebrows at us, like how something can get to stabbing a pregnant woman. I don't even know if I have like where I land on it when it comes to the women specifically, but there is something to think about of the where does that victim and where does that perpetrator line go, and where do we throw rehab to sprinkle that on top? Like what's that recipe? We know the recipe to get us to stabbing the pregnant woman. What's the recipe to redemption?
That's such a good question. And I feel like once you're in the prison system, our society is set up, there is no redemption, which is not fair necessarily. I will say that while Manson, yes, was a victim, I do think it would have happened whether or not, because I think he would have just become a Bundy because he was a narcissistic sociopath. Besides being short, besides being abused, he was a con man from the beginning. He was sent to these schools because he was a petty criminal as a child and violent and weird. Like, you know,
his mom and his uncle were con men. He was born to con.
Ooh, baby.
You reminded me of something they said in the episode, actually, that made me laugh really hard. The BAU was like, who wants to torture 5 college girls? And I was like, the BAU doesn't know about Ed Kemper? Like, what?
Right? Yeah, right. Have they not seen Green River? Have they not been a part of Bundy?
Ted Bundy?
It's like so funny. Yeah. They like forget.
I mean, I never thought we would see any of them out of jail.
I didn't either. No one did. My dad had issues when they let Squeaky Frome out, and I was like, she didn't kill anyone, Dad.
She figured out how to hang out with George Spahn and get bathroom privileges. So.
Yeah, she was the cleanest one. She was given handies for showers.
Smell like onions.
She did not smell like onions. She was the one.
All this talk about onions, though, makes me want a patty melt.
A Patty Krenwinkel melt.
Ooh.
Sorry, I'm not proud, but
so
I had
gross.
to. It was like
so gross. Jazzy, do you know of any shows you have upcoming?
Oh my God, I do have shows. Thank you for asking. I have a show on September 18th called M's Hotcakes.
Nice.
At the Oaks Tavern in North Hollywood. You should come.
Lovely.
She has a pancake truck come to the show, so you could buy hotcakes while you watch the show.
Oh, yes. I love that.
Fun.
I know how to get Veronica places. I'm like,
baked
there's going to be a
goods.
food truck, bitch. Thank you for the plug, and thank you for this talk. Thank you for giving me an outlet to discuss these things this week, because Leslie Van Houten being released was super wild and exciting, and I was so fucking excited for this conversation.
That was crazy. There's actually a lot of news in the serial killer realm that happened, and then the Long Island serial killer they might have actually caught.
I didn't see
and
that.
we'll have an episode on him too. And then like also recently Ted Kaczynski died, and then
the Tylenol
the Tylenol suspect died. I mean, it's crazy. So much is happening right now. Well, this has been delightful. We want you back for sure.
Yes, please.
Oh, you ladies are the best. I love the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
And thank you for having me on. I was so excited and so honored. So,
yay.
Right.
Yay.
All right. Join us.
New friend. Nice to meet you, Stacey.
Join us next week for another episode of Criminal Gines.